Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. It's Tuesday and the patch notes have been posted, which means it's time for us to take a look at the top 5 changes in patch 12.3. As always, I'll be going through the biggest changes of this week's patch and letting you guys know what you can be looking forward to in the coming weeks. 12.3 actually has a ton of very impactful changes, especially stuff aimed at the pro play metagame. There are a bunch of nerfs to either champions that recently received a good bump in power, Senna for example, or champions that are still seeing a lot of play professionally, like Twisted Fate. I'm not going to be touching on all of these. Instead, I'm going to be trying to call the most impactful changes here for you guys, starting of course with our number 5 change, which is the Ahri rework. Now, I recently put out a video about this, so I'm not going to go into too much depth on all the changes. That will be linked down in the description if you want to take a look at that. There were a couple things I missed, one of which is that Orb of Deception has a slight bump to its AP ratio, which is a very nice change here. The other is that her R can actually just store 3 dashes. It's not that the total amount of extra dashes you can get is 3, meaning that Ahri can theoretically get 8 dashes if she uses her 3 base and then kills every single enemy champion during the duration of her R. She can have 8 dashes. Not that big of a deal overall, but I'm really hopeful that these changes are going to revitalize Ahri's gameplay, ideally without making her too overbearing at the same time. Moving on down to Caitlyn, who is getting a couple of taps down on this patch. Now, Caitlyn is very powerful as an early game bully, especially when dealing with some of the champions that really want to try to scale to the late game, right? These champions are the kinds of champions that Caitlyn can really prey upon because they don't have the strength to contest her range in lane. Riot aren't trying to move her away from that role. Instead, they're just trying to make her slightly weaker in the mid to late game by removing some of her excess strengths. So in that regard, her scaling is slightly weaker here overall because she has less base or less AD per level and less AD growth, and Q's damage against secondary enemies has also been reduced. This means her wave clear is weaker and her ability to scale is weaker, but she's still going to be very powerful in the early game, so if that's when you're playing her, that's still what she's going to be good for. Moving on all the way down here to Zeri, who is getting nerfed on this patch. Now, Riot anticipated that she was going to build Trinity Force, but she's significantly stronger on Trinity Force than she should be. So Riot are trying to nerf Trinity Force more than crit, but because there is a little bit of overlap, they are buffing up some of her critical strike chance builds by comparison. So I don't think these changes are like the biggest deal for Zeri. I do think that they hurt her a little bit, but generally speaking, I feel like these are some small changes, just tweaks really, to try and get Zeri into a slightly better place, especially if she does continue to build Trinity Force. Finally, we go on down to the AD fighter changes. Now, there's a lot of this stuff. Generally, Riot are targeting the light fighters that are able to get a ton of health while building sort of the traditional fighter items, which makes them not only tanky, but also be able to deal high amounts of damage while also having tons of mobility, kind of getting the holy trinity of stats there, and sort of removing their balance, right, which is kind of a problem with these fighters. Right, are addressing this by, generally speaking, shifting the stats from these items from health into attack damage, which means that these characters can build them, they're still going to get damage, but they're not going to be as durable as they may have been beforehand, while generally the tankier fighters that were building these items as well are going to be mostly unaffected because they're still going to be tanky just through like raw base stats, which is a big deal. One of the other things here, and the number 1 change of this week's patch, is the Sterix Gauge change, which Riot are trying to make this less of a catch-all defensive item for everybody, and trying to definitely push it back into the spot of this is for heavier fighters. In that regard, the 40% base AD as bonus AD has come back as a passive, as has the shield based on 75% of your bonus health. This was actually how Sterix Gauge was originally created, and then Riot reworked it for the preseason, and now they're putting it back to where it was before because that's better for the tankier fighters that want to build this as opposed to the light fighters where they're now supposed to be using Death's Dance as an item instead, which has been reworked to be very similar to what it was pre the Mythic Forge update as well. So interesting changes overall here. Really excited for the Sterix Gauge change, as I think it's just been so oppressive. It's so good you have to build it in every game, and I feel like it's going to be in a much better spot now. And that is going to be it for me today, guys. Those are the top 5 changes of patch 12.3. You guys will have to let me know what you're most excited for down in the comments section below. I know I'm excited for the fighter itemization rework, but let me know which changes you're most excited for, because there's a lot that I wasn't able to touch on in today's video. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you really enjoyed the video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.